What's going on, everyone? Dots Gaming here, and today I'm bringing you guys an average player's arena tier list for World of Warcraft Shadowlands. This is the 9.0.2 patch, but I think this will hold relatively similar for 0.0.5 as well. I'm just going to be going through each of the different specs and why I think they're good or bad to try to climb in arena with at the moment, mainly looking through LFG, as that's what the average player is going to be mostly trying to do. And so that's what I want to just quickly discuss that with you guys today. Plus, I do get asked a bit about it quite a bit on my stream. And so I thought it would be good to just make a video like this. And I also do plan on making a PvP race tier list, as well as a tier list discussing which PvP class I think are the easiest to just kind of pilot. And so, if that's something you guys think would be also very good videos, let me know in the comments below. But kicking off today's tier list, we're going to be starting off with the melee first, with our first D tier being Fury Warrior. Fury just doesn't bring anything that Arms doesn't already have. Arms is just better spec. It's just a better spec at the moment. Fury has like one comp really, and it could play maybe with a Windwalker Monk, but even then the Windwalker Monk has a billion other better comp options. So it makes Fury really difficult to try to climb an arena with, especially looking through LFG. Outlaw kind of suffers a similar fate in my opinion for the Rogue. It doesn't do anything better than Assassination or Subtlety, so it's like it just doesn't bring anything to a team that the other two specs don't already bring that's better. So you're going to have a lot of trouble, I think, finding people to want to bring you playing that spec, unfortunately, which is a shame because it is very fun. Moving on to our C tier, we have Unholy DK. Personally, I think Unholy brings decent, consistent pressure, but at the moment, with the meta being so bursty, I think that it's just a worse version of Frost. I mean, what Frost brings is, in my opinion, better. It just brings more burst, albeit it requires a bit more setup with your team. But still, I feel like between the two specs, Frost is just a bit stronger at the moment, which, I feel like if you queued it as Unholy, people might just want you to play Frost. So I do think it's a bit, it's not a terrible spec. It's not like it's Outlaw or Fury level, but it still definitely leaves a lot to be desired at the moment. With Survival, I also, in my opinion, kind of have Survival on the C tier. I'm going to be honest, I don't really see Survival that often. Its comp options are pretty limited, and I think that if you're playing a Hunter, you'd just be better off playing Marksman at the moment. The pet dies pretty easily, even though like the 20% damage has been, 20% damage reduction has been added to the pets. I still think it's just not that great of a spec right now. I don't think it just doesn't do anything exemplary. So very similar to Unholy, where unfortunately, I think you might have a little bit of trouble finding teams to play. Same thing with Assassination Rogue. I think Assassination's damage is okay. It's actually pretty good. But the issue is that I feel like the way that Rogues play right now and the comps that they do well in, they do well at setting up their partners to execute kills. And Subtlety just brings more crowd control to accomplish that. Even though Assassination damage is pretty good, right now the Rogue's job in its comps is primarily crowd control, which is why Subtlety goes on the B tier. I do think Sub is a better spec than a B tier spec, but because a lot of its comps require a lot of setups with crowd control, when you're playing with people maybe that you don't know, or you're not as, you guys don't have as much synergy, maybe you're not even using voice, it becomes a lot harder to execute those setups. So for that reason, I don't think Subtlety is going to be, it's not like an A or S tiered LFG spec. I think it's just, it's good just because sub rogues are still good, but it just requires a little bit more coordination to pull off, which is the same thing with a Frost DK. Frost DK is a good spec right now, in my opinion, but it doesn't have a crap load of comps it can play in, and it does require, like Sub, a bit more setup, especially if you're playing something like Walking Dead. You have to coordinate the grip into the Blinding Sleet, into the leg sweep, into Chill Streak. And if you're playing with some dude that you don't know, or again, you're not using voice, it could, I think, maybe be a little bit challenging. Demon Hunter, I think, is also a B tier spec. Mainly because I think its damage is pretty solid, especially with the Hunt. The Hunt is a really powerful skill, the Night Fae Covenant skill, and I think the big thing that Demon Hunter struggles with right now, though, is just a little bit of community perception, and it's very squishy, very squishy. So as the Demon Hunter, you're going to want to play, in my opinion, primarily in comps where you will not be the focus target, because if you are, it's definitely not the easiest to stay alive. You got to do a lot of kiting, but I still think the spec is decent because it does bring a boatload of damage through its cooldowns, and so I think it's still it's a pretty decent spec. Moving into the A tier, we have my personal favorite, and that is my Feral Druid. Feral Druid, it brings a lot of healing, it brings a lot of crowd control, and it brings solid damage during its goes. Outside of its goes, and maybe not as much, but during the 30-second burst windows with Tiger's Fury, you can deal a lot of damage during that time period and set up a lot of bursts, big ferocious bites. You have a lot of crowd control, and as Feral, you can really set the tempo of the game honestly by yourself. So it's a really good spec. I think of the A and S tier specs, I think it's one of the lower ones, but it's still very solid, and you can still find there's a lot of comp options for Feral, a lot of different comps you can play in. You have Kitty, Jungle, Feral Mage. There's a bunch of different things that you can do. You can do Jungle with Survival Hunter, Jungle with Marksman Hunter, depending on what you want to play with. So lots of different good comps right now, and just very solid overall spec. I think a little bit above it in our A tier is going to be the Enhancement Shaman. Enhancement brings, again, really good burst, really good off healing. Ascendance and Chain Harvest is just ridiculous combined with Doom Winds. It's just such a strong spec right now, especially if you play Turbo with the Arms Warrior. Spec is really good. You can have a lot of team utility with Hex and your totems and Purge. You can just really accomplish a lot, and because melee cleaves I think are a bit easier for LFG, and Enhancement Shaman plays in Turbo as one of its primary comps. It's just, I think, a really solid spec overall for LFG right now. Now, also in my A tier, I have Windwalker Monk. Now, the reason I don't have Windwalker in the S tier personally is because although Windwalker has really powerful damage cooldowns, it's very squishy. And so if you're playing with a healer that's maybe not as on the ball, or you don't have good communication with your teammates, for defensive cooldown usage, overlapping cooldowns as a Windwalker can be devastating, because then you just leave yourself very open to being hit, just outright killed. But that doesn't matter as much so, because Windwalker's damage is just so oppressively high. So it's definitely one of the better specs to climb an LFG with. Absolutely. It's incredibly good right now, incredibly strong. And so for that reason, it is at the upper end of our A tier. Now, moving into the S tier, we have Arms Warrior and Ret Paladin. Both classes bring absurd damage. Ret Paladin's got really, really good burst, while Arms Warrior's got great consistent damage that does peak during its cooldowns. Both classes have really good utility. The Ret Paladin also has a good off healing with Word of Glory, and it's the utility. Well, both classes just have a lot of utility as well, and they can influence a game in a lot of ways. So they also both have a lot of comps that they can play right now. So I think that they're two of the best melees that you could play. So this is what the melee tier list is looking like for me. Now, going into our range tier list, starting at the D tier, I'm just going to do BM Hunter, Demo Warlock, and Arcane Mage. You just don't see them. They're just not as good as the other specs on their classes, which is a shame if you do like those specs. But in my opinion, the Warlock, Hunter, and Mage all have better specs that they can play, and they just don't bring anything as good as those other ones. So for that reason, they're all kind of in the D tier, not as common. In our C tier, we have Frost Mage. Frost has gotten a little bit of buffs recently, and it has gotten a bit better. But I mean, when you have Fire as a spec you can play, it's definitely hard to want to bring a Frost Mage at the current moment, because Combust is just ludicrously powerful. So it's an okay spec. It does all right, but when you have the option to play Fire, it's kind of hard. I think it's going to be hard, find groups when you're not playing Fire. I think Destro is also an okay spec too. I've played against personally some Destro comps that have definitely taken me off guard. During Dark Soul, Chaos Bolt hits like an effing truck. It's super, super strong. But I think, again, from a community standpoint, I feel like people are more, the Affliction's a little bit more desirable right now. But I think Destro has been getting a little bit of love recently from Blizzard, and it's not, a terrible spec to try to play, but it's definitely not a good one. So it's just very but again, good burst during Dark Soul, but definitely pretty squishy. Affliction, I think personally, this is my opinion, I think Affliction's a B tier spec, and I think once Shadow Resistance Aura 9.0.5 goes away, Affliction's only going to be better. I think they bring really powerful, consistent pressure, especially if you play Shadow play. You have the ability to cover a priest's mind games with your unstable affliction so that if someone tries to cleanse it off, you're just going to not only take a lot of damage, but you're going to get silence from the UAs. And as games go on, the unrelenting pressure from the affliction lock definitely does stack up over time. They are very squishy though, very, very, very squishy, which I think is what kind of makes Warlock a bit like right now, especially to big burst damage. But if you can utilize the mobility to its advantage, I think when the Shadow Resist aura goes away, Affliction is going to be in a much more solid spot. Also in that B tier, we do have Marksman Hunter. Marksman Hunter does bring a lot of burst to the table, and they are very, very elusive, although their comp options are a bit limited in what they can play. But in my opinion of the Hunter specs, it is the best at the moment right now. It's very solid. I don't think it's terribly weak, but it's not overly powerful. It's just very okay. So I think again, Hunter's in a very okay option. Moving into our A tier, though, I have Shadow Priest. Shadow Priest is really, really good right now. I don't think Shadow Priests are by any means overpowered, but they're just a good class. They have a lot of utility, a lot of consistent damage, great burst with Void Eruption. They just have a really solid toolkit, good low cooldown defensives. Just very solid class overall right now, and I think you could be very successful in LFG with a Shadow Priest. And I also feel that way about Elemental Shaman. Elemental Shaman, again, very similar. Good off healing, good utility, amazing burst. You just have a lot that you bring to a team, and you can really make huge impact on a game as an Elemental Shaman. And Ellie's also have a lot of decent comps right now too, since they've gotten a lot of love with Shadowlands. So for that reason, they are, in my opinion, the other A tier spec. Now going into our S tier, it should be no surprise to anybody if you've played Arena for any amount of time this season, is the Fire Mage and the Balanced Druid. Fire Mage brings just a ludicrous toolkit, because the Mage toolkit is insanely good, but then also every single time Combust is up, the Mage can score a kill by himself. And so for that reason, you're able to heavily influence the game as a mage, especially if you're, like I said, in LFG. Yeah, mage comps require a little bit more setup, but if you're a good mage and you have a halfway decent, like a rogue or a feral or a different class on your team, you can do a lot of damage if you're left untouched and if you're left free to do your thing. Combust is super scary. Polymorph's really good. DB, Ring, Triune. You have a lot of mobility. It's just very, very, very good spec. It's just super good right now. With Boomkin, of course, you're really tanky with your bear form. You bring the druid utility and healing to the table. And of course, you also have something like Convoke the Spirits, which if you pop it with your Incarn and your Aura Mastery and your On Use Trinket, like if you have a Paladin on your team with Aura Mastery, I mean, if you're especially like at lower MMR and a team is not prepped for, I mean, even when you get to higher MMR too, like if people are not ready for Convoke, if they're not ready to stop it, you can just destroy someone in less than a second. It's just incredibly powerful, really, really solid spec right now. And it's honestly, I think, pretty decent to set up with by yourself, because you can just root beam the healer. And as long as you can have, you're at a really far range for the people you're trying to attack, you can just hit them with a big Convoke, and that's all she wrote. So this is what I think is the tier list for the ranged classes. Now, moving into our healers, we are going to start. We'll start with the bottom, go up. Unfortunately, I think right now, I don't think Mistweaver is all that good. It's a shame, because I think Mistweaver Monk is a super fun class. It looks really cool. It's gotten a bit of buffs recently, but it will be interesting to see if the 9.0.5 buffs do move Mistweaver up at all. Right now, it just really kind of suffers in the meta. I think it just, the cooldowns that it has and the way that it heals just doesn't work as well in the current meta game. I feel that Druid kind of suffers the same fate, although Druid is getting some buffs going into 9.0.5, so it may move up a tier. But again, Druid is very similar to Mistweaver in the respect that they just don't work as well in the current meta. But I've played against some really good Resto Druids that do make my life a living hell. So if you're good at like cat weaving on a Resto Druid, like you can absolutely control a game pretty well. But unfortunately, I just don't think that the throughput and cooldowns are as good as some other healer specs at the moment. Again, it's very similar with Mistweaver, where they're just cooldowns don't feel as good in the current meta. I also have Disc Priest. I think Disc Priest is a B tier healer for like something like LFG. This priest is really good. You got a lot of damage. You have mind games that you can cover that deal, huge damage with. But the issue is that Disc Priests have a lot of mana issues. They also do need, I think, a bit of peeling if they are being heavily focused. And again, when you're in LFG, people that you don't know, that might be a problem. I have a friend who has played melee. He tried playing a melee cleave healing on his Disc Priest, and when he was just getting focused, the other melee were just mongoing the other healer, and he got no peels and ended up dying, and then they got mad at him. And so while Disc Priest is really good, they quick. They do definitely need some peels from the teammates if they're getting hard focused. But they did influence the game in a lot of ways with the amount of damage and their cooldowns, and of course, mind games being powerful. But I think that, like I said, the mana problems and being sometimes reliant on teammates for help can make like an LFG type of experience a bit more difficult. I think Resto Shaman is also an A tier healer. Good cooldowns, really powerful toolkit. I think the thing with Resto Shaman is like when you play with a good Resto Shaman, you're playing with a good Resto Shaman because they can just influence the game in so many ways. They have a lot of totems to do a lot of different things. Wind Shear is such a powerful tool to have on a healer, especially if you're playing something like a melee cleave. Having a range interrupt is super, super nice. Hex is really powerful as well. They just bring a lot of tools to the table, and I think that as the game continues to evolve, and I know Holy Pally is going to be getting some changes, I do think that the Resto Shaman will just continue to shine over time. But with that being said, we have the granddaddy of them all, and that is the Holy Paladin. I think Holy Paladin is just one of the best healers for LFG. It is the best healer for LFG due to a number of reasons. It's got good healing throughput. It's got really powerful cooldowns for the way that the game currently plays out right now. And it's also, in my opinion, one of the more forgiving healers in the game because it's very reactionary. You can react to things as they happen. And so you have a lot of oh no cooldowns and a lot of ways to, get your team out of a bad spot if things do go south. So they're just a really powerful healer right now, and I think the best in the game. But there's one more spec down at the bottom that it's not the right icon, but it's the Holy Priest. I personally think people are sleeping on Holy Priest. I know some people are going to immediately go to the comments and tell me I'm an idiot, but I think Holy is pretty decent. I've played with a couple of really good Holy Priests, and my gosh, I loved playing with them. I personally think Holy is better than Resto and Mistweaver, at least the ones that I've played with. It's really good, in my opinion, and I think it's definitely a little bit slept on. It's a little slept on. I don't think it's necessarily Resto Shaman Holy Pally tier at the moment, but I do think it's a spec that people don't give enough credit. And I think if you do manage to find a good Holy Priest to play with, especially for twos, it's definitely something I'd recommend giving a try. I personally, like I said, I played with one once in twos, and oh man, we absolutely popped off. It was a really, really good time. So definitely think it's a bit of a slept on spec, and it offers a lot of really good raw healing. They're pretty tanky. They have like Greater Fade, which is really cool. And they also have some pretty solid cooldowns. They have good legendaries that they could use. I think it's just a very solid overall spec. They still do have mind games. They don't have, I don't think, as many mana problems as Disc Priests. So I do think it's a very solid spec and a little bit slept on. So that's my little pocket spicy choice for the tier list. But guys, that is going to be it for me today. I hope you did find this very helpful, especially if you're newer, you're looking for a class to maybe invest some time into. If you guys did like this, of course, smack a like on it. And if you really did like it, leave a comment below. And I might plan on doing more of these in the future. I want to see what you guys did think of this. I know I'm not a rank 1 player by any means. I'm just, you're an average WoW player that enjoys the game and has fun playing Arena. And I thought, it'd be maybe cool to throw my own perspective into the ring about the way that the game kind of is right now, since I know I do get asked about it a good bit on stream. So hopefully you guys did enjoy this, but let me know again in those comments below. Smack a like on it. And of course, guys, subscribe to keep up to date with all of the World of Warcraft content I put here on my YouTube channel. Beginner content, Feral Druid PvP, Woodwalker Monk PvP. And yeah, so I appreciate you all stopping by today. Thank you very much. As always, I'm Dots Gaming. I'll see you all in the next video.